Burn it. Burn everything. Leave no one breathing. The commander's voice was calm. That was the worst part, how calm it was. He tapped the map, once circled the base with his finger, and turned away like he had just ordered lunch. His men had been watching for 11 days. They knew the patrol routes. They knew the power lines. They knew which soldiers ate late and which ones slept early. They had planned this down to the last second. What they had never planned, for what no intelligence report on Earth could have warned them about, was the woman already inside that base, sitting quietly across from her younger brother, finishing her dinner. Before we go any further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Claire Westfield had not planned to feel anything when she came back. That was the whole point, actually. You drive into a dead city, you see your brother. You eat bad food in a military mess hall. You pretend everything is fine, and then you go home. Back to Portland, back to the self-defense classes she taught on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Back to the version of herself that didn't scan rooftops every time she walked outside. She had practiced that version for almost 4 years. She was getting pretty good at it. The transport vehicle that carried her into Ashford moved slowly, the road broken in too many places to go any faster. Claire sat in the back between two young soldiers who looked barely old enough to shave, and she stared out the cracked window at what used to be a city of 300,000 people. Now it was nothing. Rubble and silence, and the kind of emptiness that pressed against your chest if you let it. She didn't let it. She kept her breathing even. She kept her hands loose in her lap. And she absolutely deliberately did not notice the elevated ruins on the eastern hillside that would have given a trained marksman a clean line of sight to every major road into the valley. She noticed it anyway. Some habits don't die. They just wait. "You doing okay back there, ma'am?" one of the young soldiers asked. He had a Georgia accent and a face full of freckles, and he was trying very hard to be polite. "Fine," Claire said. "Just tired from the drive." "How long you planning to stay?" "A week, maybe less." "Your brother's real proud you're coming. Lieutenant Westfield talks about you all the time." Claire almost smiled. Nathan had always done that, talked about her to anyone who would listen like she was something worth bragging about. She used to find it embarrassing. Lately, she found it something closer to heartbreaking, though she couldn't have said exactly why. "He talks too much," she said. The soldier grinned. "Yes, ma'am, that's the truth." The Meridian Industrial Complex came into view a few minutes later, and Claire's first thought was that whoever had chosen it as a forward operating base had made a reasonable decision under impossible circumstances. The main building was large, structurally sound relative to everything around it, with natural choke points at 3 of its 4 approaches. The fence line was solid. There were generator units humming behind the eastern wall. You could see the logic of it. You could also see exactly how it could be taken apart. Claire pushed that thought down. Hard. She was here to see her brother. That was all. Nathan was waiting for her at the main gate, and the moment she saw him, she felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. He was taller than she remembered, though. That wasn't possible. He was 26. He was done growing. It was something else. The way he stood, maybe. The way he carried himself. 4 years ago, he had been a kid playing at being a soldier. Now he was just a soldier. "Claire." He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug that lifted her slightly off the ground. She let him. She even hugged back. "You actually came," he said against her shoulder. "I said I would." "You've said that before." That was fair. She stepped back and looked at him, and he looked at her, and for a moment, they were just siblings in a ruined city, which was better than being strangers in a comfortable one. "You look good," she told him. "You look tired." "I just told one of your guys the same thing. Stop comparing notes." Nathan laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded, and it made him look for just a moment like the 16-year-old who used to follow her around the house, asking questions she didn't want to answer. She felt a sharp, sudden ache that she recognized as love and quickly buried it beneath something more practical. "Come on," he said, grabbing her bag. "I'll show you around." The tour took about 20 minutes. Claire followed her brother through the compound, smiling when appropriate, asking civilian questions, making herself small and forgettable in the way she had learned to do years before a classroom in Portland was even an option. She saw the other soldiers watching her with mild curiosity and then losing interest. Good. She was a sister visiting. Nothing unusual, nothing worth tracking. She was also cataloging everything. Not intentionally, she kept telling herself it wasn't intentional. But her eyes moved the way they always moved, measuring, calculating, filing. The ammunition depot in the northwest corner, too close to the fuel storage for her comfort. The gap in the western fence that had been patched with what looked like two-year-old chain link. The guard rotation, which she had already mentally mapped from watching the perimeter for the 6 minutes it took to walk from the gate to the main building. And the water tower. About 800 meters out northeast of the base, rising above the ruins of what had once been a residential block. Old infrastructure, probably non-functional for years. Structurally questionable, but still standing. And positioned. Claire felt something cold move through her, quick and specific, positioned at exactly the kind of angle that an Overwatch sniper would choose if they were trying to cover both the main entrance and the eastern approach simultaneously. She looked at it for 1 second, then she looked away. Her brother was still talking. She made herself listen. Captain Hayes runs a tight ship, Nathan was saying. You'll meet him at dinner. He's good people. Little intense, maybe. Most captains are. Nathan glanced at her sideways. Most self-defense instructors don't say things like that. I've had intense students. He seemed to accept this, though. She caught something in his expression, a flicker of something he didn't say. She had always been a terrible liar around Nathan, not because he was particularly perceptive, but because he knew her before she had anything to lie about, and that made all the difference. Dinner was in the main hall, long folding tables, industrial lighting, food that was better than she expected, which wasn't saying much. There were maybe 30 soldiers rotating through along with the senior officers who constituted what passed for command structure at the Meridian Complex. Captain Hayes sat at the head of one table, mid-40s, close-cropped gray at his temples, the kind of stillness in his face that came from a long time of making decisions nobody wanted to make. He nodded when Nathan introduced her. Westfield, he said. Nathan's told us about you. You teach self-defense. In Portland. Yes. Good city. It is. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary, the way people who had trained themselves to read other people sometimes did, and then he moved on, asking Nathan a question about the next morning's patrol rotation. Claire exhaled almost imperceptibly. Across the table, Lieutenant Reyna Ortiz leaned over and offered her hand. She was about 30 with dark eyes and a direct, unself-conscious gaze that Claire found immediately likable. Don't worry about Hayes, Ortiz said quietly. He does that to everyone. He's deciding whether you're worth the oxygen, and then he decides you are, and after that, he's actually fine. I'll survive the audition. Ortiz smiled. Nathan's been talking about you for weeks. He's excited you're here. Claire glanced at her brother, who was arguing good-naturedly with Hayes about something operational. He shouldn't have made a big deal about it. He worries about you. Living alone, no family nearby. He says you work too hard and you don't sleep enough and you're not seeing anyone, and he uses these facts to explain why you're unhappy. Ortiz paused. Are you unhappy? The question was so direct that Claire almost laughed. I'm fine. That's what unhappy people say. And happy ones. Fair enough. The conversation moved on, and Claire ate her food and laughed at the right moments and let herself be ordinary. The dinner felt in moments like a small victory. She was doing it. She was here, she was present, she was her brother's sister, and nothing more complicated than that. And then she heard it, or rather, didn't hear it. She set her fork down and listened. The mess hall noise continued around her conversation, scraping silverware. Someone laughing at the far end of the table. Normal sounds. But under them, between them, there was something missing. A drone unit that had been making a low, consistent hum from somewhere above the eastern perimeter had gone silent about 3 minutes ago. She hadn't consciously clocked it until now, but her brain had been tracking it the way a musician tracks a note that drops out of a chord. She looked at Ortiz. Is there supposed to be a drone running northeast right now? Ortiz blinked. How did you? She stopped. It's a rotation schedule. They run until 2100 and then... It's 1940, Claire said. It went quiet about 3 minutes ago. Ortiz was already reaching for her radio, and across the table, Hayes had caught the movement. Ortiz, checking on the northeast drone, sir. Possible signal drop. Hayes frowned. His eyes moved to Claire briefly, then away. Get me confirmation. The confirmation came back 30 seconds later. The drone had lost signal. Technical issue, the operator said. Probably interference from the old industrial equipment in the area. Probably. Hayes accepted this and returned to his conversation. Claire picked up her fork again, but she didn't eat. She was listening to the nothing where the drone had been, and she was thinking about the water tower, and she was thinking about a patrol report from 3 days ago that she had overheard when she arrived, something about a militia contact who hadn't checked in, and she was trying very hard not to think about what all of these things meant when you put them together. She failed. After dinner, Nathan walked with her to the small room they'd set up for her stay, a converted storage space, nothing luxurious, cot and a footlocker in a window that faced north. It was fine. She'd slept in worse. "You're quiet," Nathan said. "I'm always quiet." "You're more quiet than your normal quiet." He leaned against the doorframe. "Claire, what's going on in your head?" "I'm tired, like I said." "You haven't been tired for 10 seconds in your entire life." She sat down on the cot and looked at her brother, and for a moment she considered telling him about the drone, about the militia contact, about the water tower, about the way her instincts were screaming at a frequency that she could feel in her back teeth. But she didn't know anything, not for certain, and the last thing she wanted to do was walk into her brother's world, into his chain of command on the first night of her first visit, and announce that something was wrong based on nothing except the feeling in her chest that she had spent 4 years trying to unlearn. "Get some sleep," she said instead. "Don't you have an early patrol?" Nathan looked at her for a long moment. He had his mother's eyes, hazel changeable, able to hold more than one thing at once. "Good night, Claire," he said finally. "Night, Nathan." She waited until she heard his footsteps move away down the corridor. Then she sat in the dark and the quiet and let herself think. She thought about the water tower. She thought about the angles. She thought about the 11 days it would take a competent reconnaissance team to fully map a forward operating base of this size patrol, schedules, shift changes, guard positions, supply lines, communication, and infrastructure before they were confident enough to act. She thought about how confident you would need to be before you brought the full weight of an assault down on a military installation. 11 days. She had no idea how long the militia contact had been missing. At 2300, she stood up, went to her window, and looked out at the northern approach for 15 minutes without moving. Then she made a decision that she would regret in some ways and not regret in others, which was the only kind of decision she had ever really known. She put on her jacket and went outside. The night air was cold and smelled of concrete dust and distant burning, the ambient decay of a city that had been dead long enough to stop smelling like a city. Claire moved along the interior fence line without rushing, without trying to look purposeful. Just a civilian who couldn't sleep, taking some air. Nothing unusual. She acknowledged the gate guard with a nod and kept moving. She found what she was looking for in less than 8 minutes. The observation point was set up in the shadow of a collapsed building about 60 meters beyond the northeast perimeter in a debris field that made it nearly invisible from the base. Whoever had used it had been careful enough to disturb as little as possible, careful enough to remove most traces. But they had been here long enough and visited often enough that some things were impossible to completely erase. Claire crouched and looked at the ground. Military boot prints. Not American pattern. The tread was wrong, too narrow. The heel design unfamiliar. 2 sets, maybe 3, overlapping in ways that suggested multiple visits. In the debris, half buried, she found a cigarette butt foreign brand. She recognized it from a procurement report she hadn't thought about in 4 years. And the position itself, the angle of cleared lines through the debris, the natural depression in the ground that would let a person lie prone and stay invisible, was exactly the kind of setup that someone with tactical observation training would create. Not opportunistic, not casual, professional. She stood up. Her heart was steady, which it always was when things were bad, which was either a gift or a defect, depending on how you looked at it. She looked back toward the base, toward the glow of the lights through the fence, the guard tower, the communications antenna rising above the main building, and she understood with a clarity that was almost physical that someone had been sitting in this spot, in this position, for days, looking at exactly what she was looking at now, writing it down, memorizing it, sending it back. She went inside and found Nathan. He was still awake, writing something at his desk, and when she appeared in his doorway, he looked up with an expression that moved quickly from surprise to concern. "Claire, get up. I need you to take me to Hayes." Nathan stood. "What happened?" "Someone's been running a long-term observation op on this base from 60 meters outside your northeast perimeter. At least a week, maybe more. The militia contact who went missing when exactly was that? Nathan's face changed. 11 days ago. There it was. Hayes, she said, now. Nathan didn't argue. Whatever she had let slip through in her voice in that moment, whatever fragment of her actual self she had stopped containing it was enough. He was moving before she finished the sentence. Hayes was not happy to be woken. He stood in his doorway in a t-shirt and fatigue pants with the expression of a man who was measuring out exactly how much patience he had available. And his first reaction, his immediate instinctive reaction, was exactly what Claire had expected. You were outside the perimeter, he said. I found evidence of unescorted without authorization in an active. Captain, Claire kept her voice level. Military boot prints, foreign cigarette, prone observation position with cleared sight lines directly onto your command antenna, your fuel depot, and your main gate. Someone has been mapping this installation from 60 meters out. The timeline matches your missing militia contact. Whatever is coming, it has been planned for nearly 2 weeks. Hayes looked at her. He looked at Nathan. He looked back at her. You're a self-defense instructor, he said. Yes, Claire said, I am. A long silence. I want confirmation from my intelligence officer at 0600, Hayes said. We'll conduct a sweep of the area at first light. Until then, I'm increasing perimeter watch and pulling the drone rotation forward. He paused. You'll stay in your room. Captain. You'll stay in your room, Ms. Westfield. Is that understood? She looked at him. He looked back at her. Two people in a doorway, each certain they were right, each partially wrong in ways they couldn't yet see. Understood, she said. Nathan walked her back. He was quiet for most of it, which was not typical for Nathan. At her door, he stopped. Claire, he said, how did you know where to look? I couldn't sleep. I walked. You walked to an exact observation position outside the perimeter in the dark. I have good instincts. Self-defense instructors don't have instincts like that. She opened her door. Get some sleep, Nathan. Claire, get some sleep. She closed the door. She stood in the dark room and listened to his footsteps, waiting to see if he would stop, if he would knock, if he would push. He didn't. She heard him walk away slowly, and then she heard nothing. And she was alone again, with the quiet and with everything the quiet was hiding. She didn't sleep. She sat on the cot with her back to the wall and her eyes on the window, and she listened to the bass settle into its nighttime rhythms. The guards changing the generators, cycling the distant sound of wind moving through the ruins of a city that used to be full of people. Around 2 in the morning, she heard something that wasn't the bass. She was at the window before she had consciously decided to move. She pressed close to the wall beside it, not in front of it, beside it, a habit so deeply written into muscle memory that it required no thought, and she looked out at the angle that gave her the most coverage of the northern approach. There was nothing to see. But there was something to hear, a sound that stopped precisely when she stopped moving, which meant whatever had made it had heard her first. She stayed completely still for 90 seconds. Then it came again. Not a sound exactly, more like the ghost of one. The movement of weight across rubble done by someone who knew how to move across rubble, someone who had practiced it. Not one person. More. Claire turned from the window. She reached under the edge of the cot mattress, a reflex so automatic that she actually stopped and looked at her own hands, with something like confusion when she found nothing there. Of course there was nothing. She wasn't carrying anything. She was a self-defense instructor visiting her brother. She sat down on the edge of the cot. She thought about waking Hayes. She thought about how he would respond. She thought about the word that was forming in the back of her mind, the word she had been refusing to say since she climbed out of that transport vehicle and saw the water tower. And she thought about what that word would mean for everyone in this building. The word was ambush, and it was coming before morning. She stood up. She opened her door. She walked quietly down the corridor until she found the small armed storage she had mentally filed away during Nathan's tour, a locked room, but the kind of lock that existed to deter accident rather than intent. She looked at it for a moment. Then she thought about Nathan, about his face when he laughed, about him talking about her to soldiers with freckles and Georgia accents, about a 16-year-old asking questions she never answered. She thought about all the people sleeping in this building. She reached into the pocket of her jacket and found what she needed, and in less than 4 minutes she was standing in the arms room with a rifle in her hands, running a quiet function check by touch, alone in complete darkness, and it felt like something she had never stopped doing, because she hadn't, not really. You can leave a war. You can change your name on the mailbox and buy houseplants and teach people how to break wrist grabs on Tuesday mornings. But the war doesn't change you back. It just waits. Claire checked the magazine, confirmed the chamber, and went to find a position. Ghost 7 was awake, and Ashford was about to burn. Claire had not slept, not 1 hour, not even close. She sat in the dark with the rifle across her knees and listened to the base breathe the generators. The distant footsteps of the rotating guards, the wind moving through the ruins outside the fence, and she ran numbers in her head the way she used to run them before every operation. Personnel count, entry points, response time. The distance from the northeast observation post to the command antenna was approximately 240 meters. The distance from the water tower to the fuel depot was closer to 800. If someone wanted to take this base apart from the outside, they would start with communications, then power. Then they would move the personnel into the open. It was not a complicated plan. That was the problem. The simple ones always worked better. At 5:40 in the morning, she heard Hayes in the corridor. She was back in her room before he reached her door rifle, back where she had placed it, not hidden exactly, just not visible. And when he knocked, she answered in 4 seconds, which was fast enough to suggest she'd been awake, but not fast enough to suggest she'd been doing anything worth explaining. Hayes looked at her. His expression was the expression of a man who had spent the night reconsidering something. My intelligence officer swept the northeast perimeter at 0400, he said, and he confirmed the observation position. Boot prints, debris disturbance, a cleared sight line consistent with tactical surveillance. He paused. He also found 2 additional positions we hadn't identified. One southwest, one covering the main gate approach. Claire felt something settle in her chest, like a stone dropping into still water. 3 positions, not one team. A coordinated surveillance network. She had only found 1 position in the dark. If she had found the positions in the dark, how many had the enemy left behind in the daylight? How long, she asked. Best estimate is 10 to 14 days of occupation across all 3 sites. 11, Claire said. Your militia contact has been missing 11 days. That's not a coincidence, Captain. Hayes was quiet for a moment. She could see him processing it, rearranging pieces he had already arranged in his mind, not liking where they were landing. I've ordered a full communication sweep, and I'm pulling the patrol rotation schedule forward by 2 hours, he said. We're also increasing perimeter guard density on the northeast and southwest approaches. That helps, Claire said carefully. But if they've been watching for 11 days, they already know what your maximum guard density looks like. Increasing it tells them you've found something. Hayes looked at her with an expression that was equal parts irritation and something more complicated. Ms. Westfield, with respect, you found 1 observation post. My officers have handled the rest. I found it in the dark in 8 minutes, which means whoever set it up was good, but not perfect. The question is whether the people who set it up were the advanced team or the main element. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds, which was long enough for both of them to understand exactly what it meant if the answer was advanced team. I'll be in the command room, Hayes said. Stay inside the perimeter. He walked away. Claire stood in her doorway and watched him go, and she thought about the water tower, and she thought about 3 surveillance positions, and she thought about a commander somewhere in this ruined city who had spent 11 days building a picture of everything inside this fence. She thought about how complete that picture probably was by now. Nathan found her 20 minutes later. He came around the corner of the corridor with 2 cups of coffee and the specific expression he had worn since childhood when he was trying to seem casual about something that wasn't casual at all. Hayes told me, he said, holding out a cup. She took it. What exactly did he tell you? That you found a surveillance position last night, that you were outside the perimeter without authorization. He paused. That you were right. The last part must have hurt him to say. He didn't say it in those words, but yeah. Nathan leaned against the wall beside her. Claire, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She drank her coffee. It was terrible. Okay. Who are you? Yeah. The question landed between them like something solid. Claire looked at her brother, really looked at him the way she hadn't let herself since she arrived, because looking at him, that directly made it harder to maintain the distance she needed. I'm your sister, she said. That's not what I'm asking. Nathan, you walked outside a military perimeter in the dark and found a professional tactical observation post in 8 minutes. You knew the militia contact timeline before Hayes told you. You did a function check on a rifle in the dark this morning that without thinking about it. He stopped. His voice was quieter when he continued. I heard you, Claire. At 0200, I was in the corridor. She set down her coffee cup. She looked at the wall opposite her and breathed once slowly the way she had learned to breathe when situations moved faster than she was ready for. I can explain. I'm not asking for an explanation right now, Nathan said. I'm asking if we're safe. I'm asking if what you found last night means what I think it means. Claire turned and looked at her brother. No, she said, we're not safe. Nathan absorbed that. He was good under pressure. She had always known that about him, even when he was young, even before he was a soldier. He took bad news and held it instead of dropping it. How bad, he asked. Bad enough that Hayes needs to consider evacuation. He won't evacuate on circumstantial. I know. Then what do? We stay sharp, we watch, and we hope I'm wrong. She picked up her coffee again. I'm not wrong. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. There were things moving behind his eyes that she couldn't fully read, which was new. He used to be completely transparent to her the way younger siblings sometimes were. He wasn't anymore. He had grown into someone she didn't entirely know, which was both something to be proud of and something quietly grief-inducing. Okay, he said finally. Okay, what do you need? Access to the communications log for the last 2 weeks and the patrol incident reports. Claire, I can't just... Nathan, another silence, shorter this time. Give me 20 minutes, and he said. She had the logs in 15. She read through them in the corner of the mess hall while the morning shift filtered in for breakfast, and she did it the way she had learned to read field reports. Not linearly, not start to finish, but by pattern, by gap, by the shape of what wasn't there. Because what wasn't there was as important as what was. 3 drone signal losses in the past 9 days, each one logged as technical interference, each one occurring in the northeast sector. The first was 6 days after the militia contact went missing. The timing was not accidental. Someone had learned the drone rotation schedule and was walking the signal loss line, keeping the losses just frequent enough to establish a pattern of equipment malfunction, not frequent enough to trigger a formal investigation. That was patient. That was smart. There was a patrol report from 8 days ago, anomalous disturbance in the southwest ruins investigated and cleared. The soldier who filed it had noted possible animal activity and closed the report. Claire stared at that line for almost a full minute. Animal activity in a dead city in a zone that had been evacuated for 2 years. She looked up from the logs. Ortiz was sitting across from her with a tray of food watching her read. You're not eating, Ortiz said. I'm working. What are you working on? Claire looked at her. Ortiz had that same direct gaze from the night before, unguarded, intelligent, the kind of eyes that missed less than they appeared to. She had trusted people on less. Your patrol incident report from 8 days ago, Claire said. Southwest ruins, cleared as animal activity. Ortiz set down her fork. I remember that one. Martinez filed it. He was spooked, but he didn't want to put anything official that he couldn't back up. What did he actually see? He said he thought he saw movement. Low controlled, like someone moving deliberately. But when they swept the area, there was nothing. Nothing they could confirm. Ortiz paused. He said the ground looked wrong in one spot, like it had been disturbed and then carefully put back. Claire put down the report. Where is Martinez now? On patrol, northeast sector. Ortiz was watching her carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking your animal activity was a 3-person team with a field shovel and enough discipline to clean up after themselves. She stood up. I need to talk to Hayes again. He's in a command briefing until 0900. Then I'll wait outside the door. She didn't have to wait long. Hayes emerged at 0850 with 2 officers behind him and the expression of a man who had been receiving information he didn't enjoy. When he saw Claire standing in the corridor, he stopped, and his 2 officers looked at her with the polite blankness of people who had been told she was a civilian and were finding that increasingly difficult to square with observable reality. Captain DeClaire said, the drone losses in the northeast over the past 9 days were deliberate signal interference, not equipment failure. The Southwest incident report from 8 days ago was not animal activity, and I believe there is a pre-positioned cache or relay point somewhere in the southwestern approach. They're not just watching this base. They're already inside the radius. Hayes looked at her for 3 full seconds. "Gentlemen," he said to the officers behind him without turning around, "give us a minute." They moved away. Hayes stepped closer to Claire, lowering his voice. "You read my incident reports," he said. "Yes." "Those are classified documents." "Yes." "How?" He stopped. He looked at her face. Something shifted in his expression, something that had been set against her moving by increments towards something else. "Who are you?" And I want the real answer this time. Claire held his gaze. "I'm someone who knows what an 11-day reconnaissance operation looks like from the inside. And I'm telling you, Captain, that whatever is coming soon. The surveillance phase is complete. You don't run 3 positions for 11 days and then keep running them. You run them until you have everything you need, and then you act. Based on what timeline? Based on the fact that they let you find one of the positions, maybe 2. They wanted you to find something just enough to make you increase perimeter density, which changes your normal patrol pattern, which is new data they didn't have before. You're feeding them information right now by responding." Hayes went very still. That was the moment. She could see it, the exact moment when a man who had been trying to classify her as something manageable stopped being able to do that. "What are you recommending?" he said quietly. Like the word recommending was something he was testing to see how it felt. "Evacuation of non-essential personnel. Hardening of the command center. Repositioning of your fuel depot guards to break visual pattern. And someone on that water tower with eyes on the northeastern approach before dark tonight." "The water tower is outside the perimeter." "Yes," Claire said, "it is." Hayes looked at her for a long time. Around them, the base continued its morning routine, soldiers moving equipment, running coffee, being poured, radios crackling with an ordinary traffic. The ordinary sounds of a place that didn't yet know what was coming. "I'll begin evacuation of non-combatants," Hayes said finally, "and I'll reposition the fuel detail, but I am not authorizing a civilian to occupy an external overwatch position." "Then authorize a soldier." "I don't have anyone I can spare who has the—" He stopped. "The qualifications," Claire finished for him. Another silence. Longer. "Stay available," Hayes said, and walked away. Claire went back to Nathan. She found him at his desk again, which seemed to be where Nathan went when he needed to feel like he had control of something. He looked up when she came in, and she could see he'd been thinking hard about their conversation from earlier. It was still sitting in his face, not resolved, just held. "Hayes is moving non-combatants," she said. Nathan stood up. "Then it's real." "It was always real." "Claire." He came around his desk. He was looking at her with the expression he used to wear when they were kids, and he needed her to just be his sister for 1 minute, instead of whoever else she was. "Tell me what I should know. Tell me what I need to actually know so I can keep my people ready." She looked at her little brother, and she made a decision about how much truth to give him. "Not all of it, not yet, but enough." "They know this base better than your soldiers do," she said. "They know your rotations, your equipment, your blind spots. They've had 11 days. When they move, they're going to move fast, and they're going to move smart. The first thing they'll take out is communications. The second thing is power. After that, they'll try to fragment your units, push people into isolated positions where they can't support each other." She paused. "Your job when it starts is to keep your people together. Don't let them get separated. Whatever happens, stay together." Nathan was nodding slowly. "And you?" "I'll handle what I handle." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." He looked at her. She looked back. And in that space between them, the space that existed between a woman who had spent 4 years becoming someone else and the brother who had loved the someone she'd been before something honest and unguarded moved through the air. "I'm scared," Nathan said. Just like that. No armor around it. Claire reached out and put her hand on his arm briefly, the way she used to when they were young, and the dark felt big. "I know," she said. "That's okay, use it." She left him and went to find a window that faced northeast. The day moved the way days move, before something breaks too slowly and then all at once. Claire spent the afternoon positioned where she could watch the water tower without appearing to watch it. She drank water she didn't taste and ate food she didn't remember eating and tracked the light as it changed across the ruins. At 1400, Private Chen appeared beside her. He was young, maybe 22, with serious eyes and the careful stillness of someone who understood how to wait. Nathan had sent him, apparently, which meant Nathan was doing his own version of watching her back. Lieutenant Westfield said you might want company, Chen said. Lieutenant Westfield worries too much. He said you'd say that. Chen settled into position beside her without being asked, which she respected. He also said, if you told me to leave, I should tell you he outranks you. He doesn't outrank me. That's what I figured. Chen was quiet for a moment. You've been watching that tower for 6 hours. 4. I've been watching you watch it for 2. Claire glanced at him sideways. He met her gaze steadily. She revised her estimate of him upward. You have optics, she asked. He produced a compact spotting scope from his vest. She had not seen him carrying it, which meant he'd had the discipline not to pull it out until he was sure she would accept his presence. Good instincts. Northeast quadrant, she said. 3rd floor window of the building behind the tower. Watch the shadow line. Chen raised the scope and went still. A minute passed. 2. There, he said quietly. Left edge. Was that? Yes, Claire said. That was. A reflection. Brief, controlled, the kind that came from glass or a lens being adjusted. Deliberate enough to be a signal. Subtle enough to be missed by anyone not looking for exactly that. That's not ours, Chen said. No. Then someone's. Yes. Claire stood up. Come with me. We're going to find Hayes. They moved quickly through the base, and Claire felt the shift happening inside her. The thing she had been holding back since she arrived, since the transport vehicle, since the water tower, releasing now like a held breath. She had spent 4 years pressing it down, and it didn't press down anymore. And some part of her, the part she hated and relied upon in equal measure, felt something close to relief. Hayes saw her face when she walked in, and he was on his radio before she said a word. We have confirmed external optical presence on the northeast approach, Claire said. Active observation, not residual. Someone is there right now, and they are watching. Hayes keyed his radio. All units, this is actual. Go to condition amber. I say again, condition amber. All patrol elements check in immediately. He looked at Claire. How long do we have? I don't know. Best estimate. She thought about 11 days of observation. She thought about 3 surveillance positions and deliberate signal interference in a patrol report that used the words animal activity when what it meant was not alone. She thought about a commander somewhere in this city who had been patient for almost 2 weeks and whose patience was now clearly ending. Hours, she said, not days. Hayes grabbed his radio again. Across the base, she could already hear the rhythm changing, the sound of people moving, faster equipment being checked, the specific organized tension of a military unit shifting into readiness. Good. Fast. But maybe not fast enough. Nathan appeared in the doorway behind her. He looked at Hayes, then at Claire, and his face did the thing she had seen it do twice in her life before, once, when their father died once during his first deployment. It went very still and very focused, the way a person's face goes when they have made peace with something they cannot change. Tell me what to do, he said to Hayes, but his eyes were on his sister. Claire looked back at him. She looked at the rifle leaning against the wall behind Hayes's desk. She looked at the window and the dying light outside and the water tower rising dark against the sky. She thought, I came here to see my brother. I came here to be ordinary. I came here to have dinner and go home and water my plants and teach women how to break wrist grabs on Tuesday mornings. She thought that was never going to be how this ended. Get your unit to the secondary staging point, she told Nathan. Keep them together. Keep them off the main corridors. And whatever you hear in the next few hours, do not break position until you have a direct order from Hayes or from me. Nathan's jaw tightened. From you. From me. Claire, you're not Nathan. Her voice was quiet and absolute. Trust me. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he nodded once, turned, and was gone. Claire looked at Hayes. Hayes looked at Claire. The water tower, she said. He was quiet for a long moment. The radio crackled. Someone on the perimeter called in a status report. The generators hummed. The light outside continued to die. There's a maintenance rifle in the equipment locker, Hayes said. Old. Bolt action. The scope needs calibration. I can work with that. 800 meters to the tower. I know. Another silence. Hayes was a man wrestling with something protocol and reality command structure, and the undeniable fact that he was standing in a room with someone who knew things he couldn't explain and could do things he couldn't authorize, and that both of those things were about to matter enormously. The locker is in corridor C, he said finally. I didn't see you take anything. Understood. And Westfield. She stopped. He looked at her with something that was almost but not quite respect. Whoever you are, don't miss. Claire held his gaze for one beat. I never do, she said. And the night began to close in around Ashford, and somewhere in the ruins beyond the fence, 11 days of patience came to its end. The maintenance rifle was exactly as bad as Hayes had described. Claire pulled it from the locker in quarter C, ran her hands along the stock, checked. The bolt looked through the scope and saw what she already knew. She would see a reticle drifted 2 minutes left. The elevation turret stiff from disuse, the glass slightly fogged at the lower edge. A weapon that had been stored instead of maintained. A weapon that someone had expected to never need. She could work with it. She had worked with worse. Chen was waiting for her at the corridor exit scope in hand, the careful stillness still on him that she had decided she trusted. He looked at the rifle and said nothing, which was the right response. You know how to spot? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. How far out have you called? 1,200 meters in training. Tonight might push that. You stay with me. You call what I ask. You do not move without telling me first. Understood. Understood. And Chen. He looked at her. Whatever happens out there, whatever you see me do, you stay calm. You stay focused. You do your job. Can you do that? He held her gaze steadily. Yes. She believed him. They moved out through a maintenance exit on the north wall, a door that existed on no official diagram she had seen, which meant Hayes had given her more than the rifle when he told her which locker to find. She filed that away and kept moving. The time was 1922. The night was cold and still, and smelled of rust and old concrete, and Claire moved through it the way she had moved through 100 nights in places she had tried to forget. Low, deliberate, reading the ground before each step. Chen behind her matching her pace without being told, which confirmed what she had suspected he had done this before, or something close enough to it that the muscle memory was there. The water tower was 800 meters from the base perimeter. On open ground, that would have been 2 minutes of movement. Through the ruins of Ashford, with the debris fields and collapsed walls and the gaps between structures that could hide a person or end one, it was closer to 12. They covered it in 10. At the base of the tower, Claire stopped and listened. 30 seconds of absolute stillness. She heard wind. She heard the distant hum of the base generators. She heard nothing that moved with intent, which was not the same as nothing being there, but it was the best information available. Up, she said quietly. The tower ladder was old iron, some rungs corroded, one missing entirely at the 14-foot mark. She went first, testing each rung before committing weight, and at the top she pulled herself through the access hatch and into the tower platform and immediately went flat. The view was exactly what she had known it would be. From 800 meters, the Meridian base spread out below and to the south like a map of itself, the fence line, the lights, the antenna, the guard positions. She could see the fuel depot. She could see the command building. She could see 3 of the 4 guard rotation points that she had mentally cataloged on her first afternoon. From here, with the right equipment, you could reach any of them. From here, with the right equipment and 11 days of knowing exactly where everyone would be, you could end this before anyone inside knew it had started. Chen settled in beside her, scope up already scanning. Northeast quadrant, he said quietly. Movement, multiple contacts. Tree line edge at approximately 900 meters. How many? Hard to confirm. At least 6, maybe more behind. Claire settled the rifle. The scope drift was 2 minutes left. She adjusted her point of aim mentally the way you did when you couldn't trust the glass. The elevation stiffness was harder to compensate for at distance. She would have 1 shot at each target before they adjusted. She had made worse work under worse conditions. Relay point, she said. Southwest corner of the base perimeter. Is there movement there? Chen swept the scope. 3 seconds. Yes, 2 contacts. Low and moving toward the fence. So it was both, the northeast and the southwest, simultaneously. A coordinated approach designed to split defensive response. Half the security goes northeast. The southwest team reaches the fence line, before anyone realizes the approach is bifurcated. 11 days of observation producing exactly the right plan. Chen, Claire said, get Hayes on the radio. Tell him southwest approach is active. 2 contacts at the perimeter. Tell him right now. Chen had the radio out before she finished the sentence. And then the first explosion happened. It came from the northeast, not the base of mortar round that fell 30 meters short of the perimeter fence and threw light and concussion across the ruins in a wave that Claire felt in her sternum. A ranging shot, not an error, a deliberate ranging shot, which meant the next one would be corrected. Hayes, this is Chen. We have incoming mortar northeast origin approximate distance. The second round hit the fence. The sound was different from the first, heavier, closer, and followed immediately by the sound of the fence giving way in a section that Claire had noted 2 days ago was the weakest point in the entire perimeter. 40 feet of chain link and post gone in one strike. They had known exactly where to hit. All units perimeter breach northeast. Hayes's voice came through the radio tight and controlled. Close the gap, close the third round hit the communications antenna. It didn't destroy it completely. These things rarely did, but it hit the base and the antenna shifted, and Claire could see from the tower that something in the signal array had broken, because 2 of the 3 exterior lights on the command building went dark simultaneously, which meant a power junction had been cut, either by the round or by someone already inside the fence who had been waiting for the round. Chen Boyon, Claire said, is there anyone inside the perimeter who wasn't there before? Chen swept. Can't confirm from this angle. Try the northeast breach point. He swept. Movement through the breach. Multiple contacts, moving fast, military spacing. They were inside. Claire found the first target at approximately 400 meters, a figure moving along the inner fence line in the specific way that someone moves when they know exactly where they are going. She adjusted for drift for elevation for the wind she had been reading for the past 10 minutes. She exhaled. She fired. The figure went down. The ones behind it scattered, which was the right response and the expected one, and it told her something useful they had trained for sniper contact, which meant they would find her position within minutes if she stayed static. Move after every shot, she told Chen. Left 4 feet, now. They moved. The base below had become chaos in the way that only a well-planned assault produces not random chaos, but structured chaos that pushed people in specific directions. She could see soldiers responding to the northeast breach and not seeing the southwest team that was now clearly through the fence on the opposite side. She could see the command building lights cycling as someone tried to restore power. She could hear, even from 800 meters, the specific quality of radio traffic that meant multiple people were talking at once, and no one was hearing anyone. The 4th mortar round hit the fuel storage. The explosion was large enough that she felt the heat of it from the tower, and in the light it threw across the base, she could see everything at once, the breach points, the responding soldiers, the enemy contacts moving through the interior, and Nathan's unit, which was exactly where she had told him to put them, secondary staging point together, not broken apart. Good. He had listened. Chen northeast tree line command element. Find me the command element. What am I looking for? Someone who isn't moving. Someone watching. Elevated position if they have one, or stationary at the tree line. They'll have a radio and they won't be rushing. Chen swept. 15 seconds. The base burned below them. Got him, Chen said. Tree line 11 o'clock from northeast breach. Stationary, elevated on a debris pile. Radio. Claire shifted, found the position. 600 meters elevated target wind left to right at the current position. The scope drift was still 2 minutes left. She needed to account for all of it simultaneously, and she needed to do it in less time than the targeting solution deserved, because every second the command element was standing was another second of coordinated assault. She breathed. She settled. She did not rush. She fired. The figure on the debris pile went down. For approximately 4 seconds, the assault communication structure collapsed. She could tell from the ground the movement patterns changed, became less coordinated. The soldiers who had been moving with that precise tactical confidence, suddenly moving with something more like instinct, which was slower and less lethal, and gave the soldiers inside the base a fraction of a second longer to respond. 4 seconds. In a firefight, 4 seconds was everything. They've got our position, Chen said. 2 contacts breaking from the tree line angling northeast toward the tower base. How long? 3 minutes, maybe less. Keep spotting. Northeast breach, is there a machine gun position? Affirmative. Left of the breach, suppressing the guard corridor. She found it. The drift, the elevation, the wind. She fired. The suppressing fire from the breach point went silent for 15 seconds, then resumed at reduced rate. She hadn't taken out the position, but she had disrupted it enough to give the soldiers in the guard corridor the window they needed to move. She heard them move. She heard Hayes on the radio directing them. Good man, Hayes. Once he accepted a situation, he moved fast inside it. 2 contacts at tower base, Chen said. They're on the ladder. Claire was already moving. Down, west side, now. There was no west side ladder. There was a structural brace that ran down the outside of the tower at an angle steep enough to be nearly vertical, and she went down it hand over hand, with the rifle slung across her back and Chen 3 feet above her. And when the person coming up the east ladder reached the top platform, she was already 15 feet below the deck and dropping. She hit the ground hard. Chen hit harder. She heard him grunt, heard him pull breath, heard him keep moving, which was what mattered. They ran. Behind them, the tower platform erupted small arms fire. 3 shooters coordinated, which meant the 2 contacts Chen had tracked had a third she hadn't seen. She felt rounds pass through the space she had just vacated. Close. Too close, but behind her, not through her. You hit, she called to Chen. Negative, you keep running. They covered 60 meters before she found what she needed. A collapsed wall that gave cover from 3 directions and a sightline south toward the base. She went flat behind it, pulled the rifle from her back, and found Chen already settling in beside her with his scope up. We're outside the perimeter, he said. I know. With 2 confirmed hostiles behind us and the entire base engaged. I know. What's the plan? Claire looked through the scope at the base. She could see the fuel depot burning. She could see the breach points. She could see the enemy contacts moving through the compound interior with the confidence of people who had rehearsed this. She could see soldiers of the Meridian base responding bravely, genuinely, but reactively, always 1 beat behind a plan that had been designed 11 days ago and was executing perfectly. She could see Nathan's unit still at the secondary staging point, still together. Nathan moving among his people. She could read his posture from here the way a sniper learned to read bodies at distance. He was keeping them calm. He was keeping them ready. He was doing exactly what she had told him. The plan, Claire said, is to work. She found the next target. The base was fragmenting in exactly the way the enemy had designed it to fragment units being pushed apart from each other. Communication breaking down individual soldiers, making individual decisions without coordination. It was elegant in the way that violence is sometimes elegant, which is to say efficient and terrible simultaneously. The machine gun position at the northeast breach was the priority. It was pinning 2 guard units against the eastern interior wall, preventing them from responding to the southwest breach, where the second element was moving toward the command building. She needed to suppress or eliminate the gun, give the pinned units room to move, and do it from 600 meters with a rifle that had been stored in a locker for 2 years. She had made worse shots. She exhaled. She fired. The gun went silent. Southwest breach, she told Chen immediately. Find the element moving on the command building. 4 contacts, 20 meters from the command entrance. Radio Hayes. Chen keyed the radio. Hayes, this is Chen. 4 hostiles, 20 meters from command entrance, southwest approach. You need to. An explosion from inside the base cut the transmission. Not a mortar, something smaller closer. A breaching charge. The southwest element had reached the command building. Claire felt something cold and specific move through her. Not fear exactly, but the cousin of fear. The feeling that the timeline had compressed beyond the margin she had budgeted for. She was outside the perimeter, 800 meters from the building where Hayes was with 2 hostiles behind her and an unknown number between her and every person she was trying to keep alive. She thought about Nathan. She made a decision. Chen, mark our 6. If the contacts from the tower close to 50 meters, you tell me immediately. She was already moving her point of aim. I'm going to give Hayes enough room to get out of that building. From here at this range, just mark our 6. She found the approach corridor to the command building in her scope. 2 of the 4 contacts were visible, moving fast, stacked against the wall, in a breach formation that was textbook clean trained personnel executing a rehearsed plan. She adjusted for the drift, for the elevation, For the wind that had shifted 2 degrees in the last 8 minutes, she fired once. One contact went down. The remaining 3 scattered, broke formation, lost the momentum of the rehearsed breach. Inside the building, she knew that gave Hayes's people maybe 20 seconds to reorganize, to get bodies between the entrance and the command element. 20 seconds was enough. It had to be enough. Tower contacts are moving, Chen said, closing from northeast, 70 meters. Direction is straight at us. They have our muzzle flash. Yes, ma'am. Don't call me. She stopped. Fall back south, 20 meters. Now. They moved again low and fast, abandoning the collapse wall, finding new cover 15 seconds before 3 rounds hit the position they had just vacated. The hostiles from the tower were good. Fast, coordinated, using fire and movement. Professional. Claire settled behind new cover, got the rifle up, found the pursuit element at 60 meters. 2 visible when not. She fired at the first. She tracked and fired at the second before he had fully processed that the first had gone down. She held on the third position, the one she couldn't see, and waited. Chen was beside her, completely still, not breathing louder than he had to. The third contact did not appear. Either he had gone to ground or he was flanking. She gave it 4 seconds. 4 seconds in a firefight felt like standing still in the middle of a river, the current moving through you while you tried to think. South, she said. He's flanking south. How do you know? Because that's what I would do. She moved north instead. The flanker appeared at her 7 o'clock, exactly where she had predicted he wouldn't be if she had moved south, and she was already turning when Chen spotted him. Left. She fired from the hip. Not a sniper shot, a survival shot. Close range, immediate threat, the rifle doing work it wasn't designed for. It worked. Chen let out a breath that was almost a word. She pulled him to his feet. Moving, she said. Base perimeter. South entrance. We go now. They ran. Behind them, the base continued to burn and fight and break apart and hold together in the uneven, grinding way that a military unit holds together under assault through training and panic, and the individual decisions of individual people who were trying to be brave enough to be useful. As they ran, Claire heard Hayes on the radio. His voice changed now. Not just controlled, but activated the voice of a man who had accepted that the situation was what it was and was moving inside it instead of around it. All units consolidate on secondary staging. Nathan, she heard static. Westfield, get your people to secondary staging. We are consolidating and holding until... More static. The communication system was still fractured. She ran harder. Tomo. At the south perimeter fence, she found the gap she had identified on day 1, the patch of old chain link, 2-year-old material, not load-bearing tested. She hit it at a run and went through it like it owed her something, Chen 2 steps behind, and then they were inside the base, and the base was nothing like the base she had walked into 3 days ago. It was a battlefield now, and Claire Westfield, who had spent 4 years trying to stop being Ghost 7, was running through it with a rifle in her hands and blood she didn't remember getting on her jacket, and the thing she had buried was fully awake now, every circuit of it, every calibrated, terrible, essential part of it. She found Nathan at the secondary staging point in less than 2 minutes. He saw her come around the corner with the rifle and Chen behind her, and something in his face went through 5 different emotions in about 2 seconds. Relief and fear and confusion, and something she couldn't name that sat behind his eyes like a light turning on. Claire. How many? She said. 14, all present. Casualties. Martinez took shrapnel. He's walking. Hayes, command building is under him. I know. We're going to him. Keep your people here, keep them down, and do not move until you hear from Hayes or from me. She looked at her brother. He was looking at the rifle. He was looking at her hands. He was looking at her face and reading it the way he had always read her face, better than anyone, better than she wanted. Who are you? He said, quiet, not accusing, just asking. Really asking the way he had that morning, but with more information now, with the evidence of the last hour behind it. Claire looked at her little brother in the middle of a burning base in a dead city, and for the first time in 4 years, she didn't reach for the version of herself that taught self-defense in Portland. She just looked at him, and she let him see her. I'm your sister, she said, and I'm going to get you home. She turned and ran toward the command building, and behind her she heard Nathan say something to his unit. Not what she said, something different, something she couldn't quite make out over the noise and the fire and the radio traffic. But she heard the tone of it, and the tone was steady, and she knew he would hold. He had always held when it mattered. The command building was 30 meters away, and the night was not finished with any of them yet. The command building was 30 meters away, and every one of those meters had a problem. Claire moved along the interior wall with Chen tight behind her, reading the ground the way she read it in the old days, not as a path, but as a probability map. Each piece of cover, a decision point, each gap between structures, a calculation of exposure time versus distance gained. The Southwest breach team had gotten inside. She had disrupted their approach but not stopped it, and disrupted was not the same as neutralized. And 3 armed and trained people inside a building where Hayes was trying to hold command together was 3 too many. She reached the southeast corner of the command building and stopped. Put her back to the wall. Listened. Inside movement. At least 2 people moving fast through the interior corridor are not the careful movement of soldiers who own the space, but the urgent movement of soldiers trying to hold it. She could hear Hayes, not words, just the cadence of his voice, controlled and directing. He was still operational. Good. She also heard something else. A voice she didn't recognize speaking in short commands from somewhere near the building's north side interior. One of the breach team was already inside and had found cover. Chen, she said quietly, north interior, 1 hostile minimum. He's going to be using the structural column as cover. The column is load-bearing. It's the only solid cover in that corridor. How do you know the layout? I walked it the first day. She checked her remaining rounds. 3. She had not been counting with the discipline she should have been, and now she was paying for it, which was the kind of mistake that happened when you hadn't run an actual operation in 4 years, and your body was running on muscle memory while your mind was still catching up. I'm going in the south entrance. You cover the west window. Anyone comes out the west window that isn't wearing our uniform, you call it. I don't have a weapon. You have eyes and a radio. Use them. She moved before he could respond. The south entrance was unlocked. It opened inward, which she had also noted on day 1 because she had noted everything on day 1 and hated herself for it at the time and was grateful for it now. She went through low and fast and immediately went left, putting the wall behind her and the interior in front. The corridor was dim. The power junction hit by the 3rd mortar round had taken out half the interior lighting, and the emergency system was running on backup, which meant shadows where there should have been visibility. Claire let her eyes adjust in the 2 seconds she had for adjusting, and then she moved. The hostile at the structural column saw her at the same moment she saw him. He was good. His reaction was fast. Weapon coming up, weight shifting for the shot. But he was reacting to a contact he hadn't expected from that direction, which meant his muscle memory was working against his intention, and that half second of recalibration was what she needed. She fired once. 2 rounds left. Clear south corridor, she said toward Hayes' voice. 1 down. How many are you holding? Hayes appeared from the interior doorway with his sidearm up, a cut above his left eye bleeding freely down the side of his face. His expression, the expression of a man who was running on controlled fury and would process everything else later. 1 more somewhere in the north section, he said. Corporal Webb is down. He's breathing. He took shrapnel to the leg. I've got Ortiz at the north end holding. Ortiz is alone. She had Chen's radio call. She went to the north end 30 seconds ago. Claire was already moving. Watch the south entrance. The north corridor was 12 meters long, and at the far end she could hear Ortiz, not see her, hear her, the sound of controlled breathing and a boot shifting on concrete. Someone holding position in the dark with professionalism and probably a great deal more fear than they were letting themselves feel. Ortiz, Claire said quietly. It's Westfield, where supply room door, 3 meters on your left. He went in when he heard me coming. A supply room, small space defensible from inside one entrance. The hostile had gone to ground, which meant he was waiting either for backup that wasn't coming or for one of them to make the mistake of going through that door. Claire looked at the door. She looked at the ceiling. The building was old industrial construction. The supply room would have a ventilation grate in the upper wall, not large but present, because every room in a building like this had ventilation, and ventilation had a specific acoustic property when someone was standing below it. She listened for 2 seconds. He's not at the door, she said to Ortiz. He's at the back wall. He's expecting a breach from the door. Don't give it to him. Then what? Does this building have a north exterior access panel, utility panel maintenance access, something that comes through the exterior wall of that room? Ortiz thought for half a second. Generator relay panel, north exterior wall, about 4 feet off the ground. Show me. They went out the north exterior entrance. Claire first, Ortiz behind her, moving around to the north face of the building where the utility panel was exactly where Ortiz said it would be. Claire examined it in the dim light. Sheet metal panel, 4 bolts not sealed. She looked at the wall beside it, calculated the interior dimension of the supply room, placed the hostel at the back wall facing the door. She handed her rifle to Ortiz. Ortiz looked at it, then at her. You only have 2 rounds. Used one inside. Then why are you? Because if I give him an exterior sound to react to, he moves off the back wall. And when he moves off the back wall, you have a clear shot through the door. Claire met her eyes. You're a better shot through a doorway than I am at 1 round from an exterior panel. Ortiz held the rifle. Her jaw was set and her eyes were clear, and she was afraid in the way people are afraid when they understand exactly what they're agreeing to. On your signal, Ortiz said. Claire hit the utility panel hard once a solid metallic impact that resonated through the exterior wall into the supply room. She heard movement inside. Immediate instinctive movement, exactly as predicted, the hostile coming off the back wall, turning toward the exterior sound. Ortiz went through the door. 1 shot. Silence. Then Ortiz's voice steady, clear. Claire let out a breath. She went back around to the north entrance, found Ortiz standing in the supply room doorway, with the rifle lowered and her hand not quite shaking, the specific fine tremor that happened after never during. Good shot, Claire said. You were right about the angle. You made it, that's what matters. Ortiz looked at her. In the dim light with the building around them, still carrying the noise and shock of everything that had happened in the last 40 minutes, her expression had something in it that Claire recognized, the look of someone revising an assessment they thought was finished. Who are you? Ortiz said. It was the 3rd time someone had asked her that in the last 8 hours. Claire thought briefly that she should find a better answer. Let's get back to Hayes, she said instead. The time was 21:14. The base outside was still engaged. She could hear it through the walls, the specific audio texture of a firefight that had not resolved sporadic small arms, the occasional heavier impact radio, traffic cutting in and out. But the quality of it had changed from what it had been 30 minutes ago. Less coordinated from the enemy side, more structured from theirs. Hayes's consolidation order had worked. She could hear units talking to each other again, which meant communication had partially restored, which meant the soldiers inside the fence were no longer fighting in isolation. That was something. It was not enough. Hayes was at the command console when she returned to the main room. Webb's leg wrapped and Webb conscious and pale on the floor beside him, 2 soldiers covering the south entrance. Hayes looked up when Claire came in and processed her in a single glance. No rifle blood on her jacket, upright and functional. North section is clear, she said. You've got 1 hostile down in the south corridor, 1 in the supply room. Your command building is clean. Hayes looked at her for a beat longer than necessary. Ortiz. With me, she's fine. He nodded once, then he turned back to the console and keyed the radio. All units, command is operational. Report status. The reports came back in pieces: a northeast breach, partially contained southwest breach, sealed enemy contacts inside the perimeter. Reduced but not eliminated Nathan's unit at secondary staging, intact fuel depot fire, controlled to 1 tank. The picture that assembled itself from the radio traffic was of a base that had been hit hard, hurt badly, and had not broken. Not yet. But the next wave was the question. They'll reassess, Claire said to Hayes. They lost their command element at the tree line, they lost their interior breach team, and their coordinated assault is running on individual initiative now instead of a plan. That buys us time, but not much. How much? Depends on who's next in their command structure. 30 minutes if they're organized, 90 if they're not. Hayes absorbed this. Around him, the 2 soldiers at the south entrance were listening without appearing to listen, which was something soldiers learned because the alternative was not knowing things that might keep you alive. I don't have a reinforcement window under 2 hours, Hayes said. I called for rapid reaction 30 minutes ago. Earliest arrival is 2300. 2300 was 93 minutes away. Then we hold, Claire said. With what my perimeter is compromised in 2 places, I've got casualties I can't fully count yet. In my external overwatch position, he stopped. He looked at her. You're not on the water tower. The tower is compromised. They sent a team for it. Then we have no external overwatch. We have me, Claire said, and we have Chen. Hayes looked at her with the expression of a man who had spent 40 minutes watching a civilian visitor do things that had no explanation under any identity he had been given for her, and was now at the point where the gap between what he had been told and what he was observing is too large to continue holding both things at once. I need a real name, he said, not Westfield, the self-defense instructor. The real one. The room was quiet except for the radio and Webb's breathing and the distant sound of the fight outside. Claire looked at Hayes at his cut forehead and his steady eyes and the specific exhaustion of a man who had been carrying a base full of people through something that should have broken them and hadn't because he hadn't let it. Ghost 7, she said. Hayes went very still. Ortiz, standing behind her, made a sound that wasn't quite a word. One of the soldiers at the south entrance turned around. He caught himself and turned back, but not quickly enough. Ghost 7, Hayes repeated, not a question. Just repeating it the way you repeated something when you needed your brain to confirm what your ears had delivered. Former covert contractor, Claire said. Specialized long-range precision work. I've been out for 4 years. I'm not out tonight. Hayes stared at her. She watched him work through at the observation post she'd found in 8 minutes the classified incident reports. She'd read the shot from the water tower at 600 meters with a compromised scope, the command element she'd taken down in the tree line. The supply room breach she'd set up with 1 round left. All of it recontextualizing in real time. Nathan doesn't know, Hayes said. He's starting to? Colonel Briggs. Hayes said the name like it unlocked something. Briggs sent you? Claire blinked. One small involuntary blink, which was all she gave him, but it was enough. Briggs didn't send me, she said carefully. I came to see my brother. But Briggs knows you're here. She said nothing. Hayes made a sound that might have been a laugh if the situation had been different. Of course he does. He shook his head once and then he put it aside the way commanders put things aside when there was still work to do. What do you need? A secondary position. Elevated eastern approach. Something that covers the breach point and the main corridors simultaneously. And Chen, I need Chen. Chen's a PFC. Chen is good. I've seen him work tonight. I need his eyes. Hayes looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he keyed the radio. Chen, report to command. Double time. While they waited, Claire checked her remaining round, confirmed the rifle from the south corridor. The hostile's weapon, which she had picked up on her way back, a good rifle better than the maintenance piece properly zeroed full magazine. She swapped it out without ceremony. Ortiz watched her do it. 4 years, Ortiz said quietly. You've been out 4 years. Yes. And you can still do all of... Ortiz gestured a small motion that encompassed everything. You don't forget, Claire said. That's the part nobody tells you. You think you can put it down and walk away from it, and you can right up until you can't. Ortiz was quiet for a moment. Do you wish you could... Claire looked at Webb on the floor, breathing. She looked at Hayes on the radio, holding the base together by the force of his discipline and his voice. She thought about Nathan at secondary staging with 14 soldiers around him, holding position because she had told him to. Ask me when this is over, she said. Chen arrived at a run, slightly winded scope still in his hand. He saw Claire's new rifle and the dead hostile in the corridor and processed it with the economy of someone who had already processed a great deal tonight. New position, Claire said. East side. You're spotting? Copy. You've done well tonight, Chen. He looked surprised. I haven't done much. You've done exactly what I asked, exactly when I asked it, without argument and without panic. In this situation, that's not nothing. That's everything. She moved toward the door. Come on. They went back out into the base. The time was 21:31. The eastern interior was less active than the south and north had been. The northeast breach had been where the assault's main weight fell, and the consolidation response had pushed the remaining enemy contacts westward away from the east wall, which meant the east wall was relatively speaking quiet, which meant it was also where Claire would be least expected. She found her position in a second-floor access point of the main building's eastern annex, a manufacturing floor from the building's previous life, now gutted to the walls with window openings that had lost their glass years before any soldier had set foot here. It gave her a 180-degree view of the eastern approach, the northeast breach, point and three-quarters of the interior base. She settled in. Chen beside her scope up immediately. Northeast breach, he said. Sporadic movement. They're using the breach point as an entry and exit contacts moving in and then back out. They're resetting, Claire said. Pulling back the compromise elements and reorganizing at the breach point. That's where they're consolidating. For another push. For a final push. One more coordinated assault before the window closes. She found the breach point in her scope. How many contacts at the breach? Hard to count. They're not staying still. Estimate 8 to 12. 8 to 12 reorganizing personnel at the breach point, with the base depleted and the perimeter compromised and the fuel depot still burning. A second assault wave with those numbers, if coordinated, could finish what the first wave had started. She keyed her coordinating. Hayes, they're regrouping at the northeast breach. 8 to 12 contacts. I think you have about 20 minutes before they push again. Can you suppress? For a while, not indefinitely. I need your consolidation complete before they move. Working on it. Hayes, she paused. Nathan's unit, I need them repositioned to cover the northeast corridor interior before the second wave hits. If the breach team gets inside again and reaches the corridor junction, they can cut the base in half. A pause. That's Westfield's unit. I know. You want me to put your brother's unit directly in the path of a second assault wave. I want you to put your best positioned unit in the place that decides whether we hold or fold. Nathan's unit is there. Nathan's unit is intact. And Nathan will hold that corridor. She could hear Hayes thinking. 15 seconds of radio silence while the base moved around them. Westfield, Hayes said, finally addressing Nathan directly, patching him into the channel. This is actual. I'm repositioning your unit to northeast interior corridor junction. You're covering the breach approach. Nathan's voice came back immediately clear and steady. Copy that. Moving now. Claire closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. 1 second of something she didn't have a word for, not pride, something older than pride, something that lived in the chest and hurt in a way that wasn't entirely pain. Then she opened her eyes and went back to work. The next 18 minutes were the longest 18 minutes. She worked the breach point, not firing continuously, which would drain her ammunition and reveal a static position, but firing in patterns disrupting organization every time the contacts at the breach began to show coordinated movement. A shot that sent 3 of them back behind cover. A 3-minute pause. A shot that cut the communication between the 2 flanking elements. Another pause. Unpredictable, unrhythmic, the kind of suppression that didn't just slow an assault but made the people conducting it uncertain. Uncertain of how many shooters were out there, uncertain of the pattern, uncertain of where the next shot would come from. Uncertainty was her best weapon tonight. Between shots, Chen fed her information, contact count, movement patterns, the radio traffic he could partially intercept on a frequency Hayes had given him. The enemy was reorganizing faster than she had hoped. Whoever had taken command after she dropped the tree line element was competent, methodical, pulling the scattered elements back into a coherent formation. At 21:49, Chen said, they've found our position. How long? Muzzle flash analysis. They've got at least 1 person tracking our shots. 90 seconds, maybe less. We move in 60. Where? There's a structural access point 30 meters south, subfloor level. I saw it on the way in. Subfloor. We'd lose the elevated angle. We'd lose the position they have us pinpointed on. I'd rather be low and alive than elevated and bracketed. Chen didn't argue. Good man. At the 55-second mark, 3 rounds hit the window opening above them. Not suppression, precision, targeting someone who knew exactly where she was and was shooting to kill. Claire and Chen were already moving low and fast, and the rounds went through empty space that still had their warmth in it. They reached the subfloor access and dropped into it, and Claire immediately found a firing slit, a gap in the foundation structure that faced northeast at a lower angle, not ideal but workable. Breach point, she told Chen. What's the status? He risked a look through the access point. They're moving, full element. It's the second wave. She keyed the radio. Hayes, second wave is initiating. Northeast breach. Now. Nathan, Hayes said on the channel simultaneously. Breach approach incoming. Hold that corridor. Nathan's voice. We've got them. We're ready. The second wave hit the breach at 21:53. Claire was firing from the subfloor position, working the forward elements, slowing the column's entry pace. buying Nathan's unit the seconds they needed to receive and hold. She could hear the interior firefight beginning, the breach team meeting Nathan's unit at the quarter junction, the specific close-range sound of soldiers fighting for a hallway. She fired. She fired. She tracked and fired and moved her point of aim and fired again, and somewhere in the compound she heard a voice she knew. Nathan's voice shouting commands to his unit, not panicked, directed, the voice of someone who had accepted what was happening and was moving inside it. Her brother was holding the corridor. She put 3 rounds into the forward breach element and felt the wave stall. Not stop, stall. Hesitate, the front of the column running into suppression. It hadn't fully accounted for while simultaneously meeting resistance at the interior junction. 2 front pressure on a momentum-dependent assault. The assault needed momentum. She was stealing it 1 shot at a time, and then her magazine ran dry. She reached for the spare and found the spare was already in the weapon. She had been running on the hostiles magazine since the command building, and she had lost count, and now she was empty at the worst possible moment. "Chen," she said, "I'm dry." Chen looked at her. He looked at the breach point. He looked at his spotting scope, the only thing in his hands. 4 seconds of silence between them, the firefight roaring around it. Then Chen pulled a sidearm from his vest. A standard 9mm short range, nowhere near sufficient for the engagement distance they were working at. He held it out to her. She took it. She looked at it. She looked at him. "That's all I have," he said. She thought about 8 to 12 contacts at the breach point and Nathan's unit at the quarter junction with whatever ammunition they had started the night with, and Hayes with a wounded corporal and 2 soldiers at the south entrance, and Ortiz somewhere in the compound, and the rapid reaction force that was still 60-some minutes away. She thought about a 9mm handgun and 800 meters of broken city between her and the only overwatch position that still mattered. She thought about the water tower. The tower team she had encountered, she had put 2 of them down on the ground outside the fence, and the 3rd had gone for cover when she and Chen ran. The tower itself had taken small arms fire from the hostile team, but the structure was still standing. She had confirmed that visually before they entered the subfloor. The tower was standing, and it was 800 meters away, and there was a rifle up there that she had left when they made the emergency descent. Her maintenance rifle. 2 rounds still in it. She had confirmed the count before she came down. 2 rounds from 800 meters with a drifted scope against a reorganizing assault. She had done more with less. Once, a long time ago, in a place she had told herself she would never go back to. "Chen," she said, "I need you to do something. Name it. Get to Hayes. Tell him I'm going back to the tower. Tell him to give me 12 minutes, and then I need his people moving, everyone who can move, pushing toward the northeast breach from the interior side. He needs to be ready to push the moment I give him a reason." "What reason are you giving him?" Claire stood up. She checked the 9mm full magazine chambered and tucked it in her jacket. "He'll know it when he hears it," she said. Chen grabbed her arm. Not hard, just present. "You're going back to the tower, alone, with a handgun and a 2-round rifle at the top." "Yes. They know the tower. They almost had you there once tonight already." "I know." "Then why?" "Because Nathan's in that corridor," Claire said, "and he's going to hold it as long as he has to. And the only thing that ends this before the wave overruns him is someone in that tower taking the assault's new command element off the board." She held Chen's gaze. 12 minutes. Then Hayes pushes. "Tell him." Chen let go of her arm. He looked at her for a moment with something in his face that was not quite the admiration she didn't want and not quite the fear that would have been reasonable. "Don't die," he said. "Working on it," she said. And she went. The night was cold and full of noise, and she ran through it with the handgun in her hand and the ruins of Ashford around her, and 800 meters between her and the only shot that would end this, and somewhere behind her in a corridor, she couldn't see her little brother was holding a line with 14 soldiers and whatever he had left in him. She ran faster. 800 meters in the dark through a city that wanted to kill her with a 9mm handgun and nothing else. Claire ran. She ran the way she had learned to run in places that had no names on any map. She was allowed to keep low and fast and reading the ground, 3 steps ahead, not looking at where she was, but at where she was going to be. The calculation constant and automatic and as natural to her now as breathing despite 4 years of trying to make it otherwise. Her jacket was wet at the shoulder. She had taken something at some point, a graze or a fragment. She genuinely wasn't certain when. And the shoulder was stiff but functional, and she filed it and kept running. Behind her inside the base, she could hear Nathan's corridor fight. She didn't let herself listen too carefully. You couldn't do what needed to be done if you were listening too carefully to what you were afraid of. The ruins moved past her in the dark. She knew this ground now, the way she knew ground after a night of working it, not mapped as shady, but felt the body of remembering what the mind cataloged. The debris field at 300 meters. The collapsed overpass at 500 where the footing was unpredictable and you had to slow or risk an ankle. The open stretch at 650 that had no cover and had to be crossed fast. She crossed it fast. At 700 meters, she found the first body from earlier in the night, one of the tower teams she had dropped on the descent. She didn't stop. At 720, she found the second. She stopped here 2 seconds and checked the weapon. A better rifle than the maintenance piece she'd left at the top, but damaged the stock had taken a hit at some point. The receiver cracked. Non-functional. She left it and kept moving. The tower base at 2203. She stood at the bottom and looked up. The ladder. 14 meters of iron rungs, one missing at the 14-foot mark, the rest corroded, but present. At the top, the platform where she and Shen had worked the first phase of the fight. The maintenance rifle she had left when they dropped. 2 rounds. She also knew that the third member of the tower team, the flanker she had redirected away from with the movement prediction, had not been confirmed down. She had heard no shot, she had seen no body, which meant he was alive, which meant he was possibly here, possibly waiting, and she was about to climb a ladder in the dark with a handgun and find out. She started climbing. The rungs were cold. Her shoulder protested the pulling motion, but she made it work, moving deliberately, testing each rung with the ghost touch she'd developed over years of moving through structures that didn't want to be moved through. At the missing rung, she bridged it, left hand high, right hand, holding the gap weight transferred in a single smooth motion that she had executed once already tonight and didn't enjoy any more the second time. At the top, she stopped, pressed against the ladder below the platform edge, listened, breathing. Someone on the platform was trying not to make noise and not fully succeeding. Claire closed her eyes for 2 seconds. Mapped the platform from memory, roughly 4 meters by 4 meters, the access hatch off-center to the left, the maintenance rifle in the northeast corner, where she had positioned it, the structural railing along the perimeter edge. If the hostile was on the platform, he was either at the hatch or at the railing. And if he was smart, and the tower team had been smart, he was at the hatch covering the only entry point, waiting for her to come through it. She didn't go through the hatch. The platform railing on the south edge had a gap. She had noticed it hours ago, noted it as a structural weakness, filed it. A gap wide enough for a person who was willing to commit to the movement. She traversed the outside of the tower along the structural brace, hand over hand, below the platform level, moving silently toward the south edge. The breathing from above her was controlled but tight. The person it belonged to was afraid. Good. Afraid people focused on the thing they were afraid of, which was the hatch, and she was not the hatch. She came up through the railing gap in one motion, no hesitation, no half measure, because half measures at this range were just slower ways to die. She was on the platform and moving before the hostile fully processed the direction of the threat, and she was close enough that the handgun was secondary, and she handled it the way she handled close-range threats, which was directly and without ceremony. 4 seconds. Then it was over, and she was the only person on the platform, and she was breathing harder than she wanted to admit, and her shoulder was telling her very clearly that it had submitted its complaint and expected acknowledgement. She picked up the maintenance rifle. 2 rounds, drifted scope, stiff elevation turret, 800 meters to the base. The second assault wave moving through the northeast breach, the new command element somewhere in the darkness directing it. The time was 22:07. She had 8 minutes before Hayes pushed. Claire settled into position and started looking. The base below was lit by the fuel depot fire still burning, throwing orange light across the northeastern quarter of the compound in a way that was tactically awful for the defenders inside and genuinely useful for her up here because it silhouetted anyone moving through or near the breach point against a background that was significantly brighter than the surrounding darkness. She found the breach in her scope and started reading the movement. The second wave was further inside than she had estimated from the subfloor position. They had pushed harder and faster than the first wave, partly because they had learned from the first wave's failures, partly because she had been suppressing them from the wrong angle for the last phase, and the suppression had been less effective than it needed to be. Nathan's corridor unit was still holding. She could hear it. The sustained engagement sound that meant two forces in contact and neither one broken. But holding was not the same as winning, and the wave had numbers and time. She needed the command element. She swept the scope along the tree line, along the breach perimeter, along every elevated or stationary position within the engagement radius. A command element in a second assault wave would be closer than the first they had lost, the first element at tree line distance, and they had learned from that too, push the command closer to the action so that control didn't depend on a single exposed figure at range. Smarter, more dangerous. She found him at 450 meters, not at the tree line. Inside the breach perimeter, using the gap in the fence as cover, directing the assault from a position that was protected from interior fire and invisible from most angles. Visible from above. Visible from a tower. She almost had to respect it. Almost. She measured the shot. 450 meters with a drifted scope and one round left after this one stiff elevation, the wind that had been shifting all night now running northwest at what felt like 8 to 10 knots. She made the adjustments in her head, all of them, simultaneously, the way she had done it in training 10 years ago and in the field 8 years ago, and never in the past 4 years because she had been teaching wrist grab escapes on Tuesday mornings. Her hands were steady. They had always been steady when it mattered, which was the thing about herself she had never fully decided if she was grateful for. She exhaled halfway and held it. She fired. The command element went down. For the second time in one night, the assault's communication structure collapsed. She watched it happen in the scope, the controlled movement below, suddenly becoming individual movement. The tactical spacing, dissolving soldiers who had been executing a plan, suddenly executing instinct instead. A command structure was a nervous system. Take out the brain and the body kept moving, but it moved wrong. She keyed the radio. Hayes, push, now. Hayes's voice came back without a half second of hesitation. All units push northeast. Everyone who's up, move. Westfield northeast corridor, advance on breach. Move, move, move. And she heard Nathan. Northeast corridor, advancing. Let's go. Stay together. Move. She had one round left. She found the most dangerous remaining contact in her scope, a machine gun operator who had set up inside the breach perimeter and was covering the interior approach that Nathan's unit was about to advance through. If Nathan's soldiers came around the corridor junction into that gun's field of fire, they were going to take casualties she could not accept. She had one round of drifted scope, a stiff turret, and Nathan coming around that corner in approximately 40 seconds. She made the shot. The machine gun went silent. Claire set down the empty rifle, sat on the platform with her back against the railing, and listened to the base below. What she heard was the sound of a battle turning. It didn't happen all at once. It never did. It happened by degrees in the specific audio texture of a firefight, where one side's coordination was collapsing and the other side's was consolidating. The enemy contacts at the breach, who had been running on a plan, were now running on survival, and survival without a plan in territory you don't own is a losing proposition. Nathan's unit came through the corridor junction. She could hear him, his voice carrying even over the distance, and the noise, the command voice he had grown into, the one she hadn't known he had until tonight. He was pushing his unit through the breach approach, driving the disorganized contacts back out through the fence, reclaiming the perimeter. He was doing it. At 22:19, Hayes came on the radio. Northeast breach is clearing. Southwest breach is sealed. I'm showing contacts withdrawing outside the perimeter. A pause. Someone want to tell me where Westfield is? Nathan Westfield, I mean. Corridor is clear, Nathan's voice said. We're at the breach point. Perimeter is holding. And the other Westfield, silence on the channel. Claire keyed her radio. Tower, she said. I'm in the tower. A longer silence. Then Nathan's voice, very quiet. You went back to the tower. Yes. Alone. Yes. She heard him exhale. It was a long exhale, the kind that carried a whole conversation inside it. Don't do that again, he said. You're welcome, she said. Hayes cut back in, and his voice had something in it she hadn't heard before. Not warmth exactly, but something adjacent to respect that didn't know how to fully express itself within a military radio protocol. All units hold current positions. Rapid reaction, force ETA, 31 minutes. Medical teams on first vehicle. Everyone stay tight and count your people. Claire sat in the tower and listened to her brother count his people. 14 soldiers, all present, Martinez still walking, despite the shrapnel, 2 additional minor casualties from the corridor. Fight nothing, life ending. She heard him count them and confirm them, and she felt something loosen in her chest that had been wound tight since the moment she climbed out of the transport vehicle 3 days ago and saw the water tower and knew. She had known, and it had cost her something, the knowing. It always did. She started down the ladder at 22:25, careful on the corroded rungs, slower than she'd gone up, because the shoulder was less cooperative now, and there was no urgency driving her, just the long mechanical process of a body that had given a great deal in a short time and was beginning to present the invoice. She was at the 8-foot mark when she heard movement below. She stopped. The movement resolved into a figure, and then into 2 figures, and then into a voice she recognized before she could see the face it belonged to. "I've got her," Chen said. "Tower South Base. She's on the ladder." And beside him, Nathan. Nathan stood at the base of the water tower looking up at his sister on an iron ladder in the dark. And Claire looked down at her brother, and neither of them said anything for a moment. He had blood on his sleeve, not his. She assessed from the pattern, and his uniform was torn at the left shoulder, and he had the face of someone who had just come through something and was still in the process of understanding what it had made him. She climbed down the last 8 feet. When her boots hit the ground, he grabbed her. Not careful this time, not the measured hug from when she arrived, not the hug of a brother greeting a sister after too long apart. This was different. This was the grip of someone holding on to something they had almost lost without knowing they had almost lost it. And Claire let him hold on, and she held on back. And for a moment, they were just 2 people standing at the base of a water tower in a dead city after something terrible, which was more honest than most of the things she had allowed herself to feel in the past 4 years. "You went back up there," Nathan said against her shoulder. "I had a shot. You had no ammunition. I had 2 rounds. That's not ammunition, Claire. That's a prayer." It worked. He pulled back and looked at her face in the dark the way he had always been able to look at her, past the surface, past what she was performing, into whatever she was actually carrying underneath. "You're hurt," he said. "It's minor. Your shoulder is minor, Nathan. I'm fine." He didn't argue, but he also didn't let go of her arm, and she found she didn't mind. Chen stood slightly apart, giving them the space with the quiet tact she had come to expect from him, and she looked at him over Nathan's shoulder and nodded once, and he nodded back, and that was sufficient. They walked back toward the base together. The time was 22:38. The base was quieter than it had been, but not quiet the particular busy stillness of a place organizing itself after violence, soldiers accounting for each other, moving casualties, securing breach points, the radio traffic shifting from combat cadence to recovery cadence. Claire moved through it with Nathan beside her and registered each element. The fuel depot fire nearly out, 2 soldiers working the last of it with extinguisher foam. The northeast breach being held by a 4-person element, the fence gap marked with chem lights. The command building lights partially restored haze visible through the south entrance. Hayes saw her come in. He looked at her shoulder. He looked at her hands. He looked at her face. "Sit down," he said. That wasn't a suggestion." She sat. A medic appeared from somewhere, young, efficient, already reaching for her jacket, and Claire let him work, which was more surrender than she usually allowed herself, but the shoulder had made its position clear during the tower descent, and she was willing to acknowledge the argument. Ortiz was there. Webb was there, leg properly dressed, now conscious and irritable about being horizontal, which was a good sign. The 2 south entrance soldiers were there, and gradually Nathan's unit began to filter in, filling the command room with the specific weight of people who had done something difficult and were still processing whether they were intact. Hayes sat down across from Claire while the medic worked. "Your command element shot," he said. "Second one, 450 meters from the tower, 1 round." "Yes." "With the maintenance rifle." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I was told Ghost 7 could shoot." He paused. "I didn't understand what that meant until tonight." Claire looked at him. "Who told you?" "Briggs, about 6 months ago." Another pause. "He told me that if anything unusual happened at this installation, and if a woman named Claire Westfield happened to be present, I should give her whatever she asked for and get out of her way." The room was not entirely quiet, but it got quieter. Nathan, standing near the wall, went very still. He knew, Nathan said, not to Hayes, to Claire. Nathan. Briggs knew something was coming. He knew, and he told you to come here. Nathan's voice was controlled, but barely. He used my invitation. He used the fact that I wanted to see you. He made it. No. Claire cut through it. No, Nathan, listen to me. Briggs knew there was elevated threat intelligence around this region. He knew I was considering visiting you. He asked me to assess the situation when I arrived and report back if I found anything concerning. He did not tell me there was an active operation incoming. He did not send me here as an asset. She held her brother's gaze. I came here because I wanted to see you. That was real. Everything else was circumstances. Nathan stared at her. She watched him work through it, the anger, the sense of manipulation, the specific hurt of someone who had believed something simple was simple and discovered it was not. She understood that feeling. She had felt it herself about things she still hadn't fully resolved. You could have told me, he said, when you found the observation post, when you knew something was wrong. You could have told me the truth about who you were. I know. Why didn't you? She thought about how to answer that. The honest answer was complicated. It involved 4 years of building a version of herself that could function without the weight of what she used to be, and the terror of showing Nathan that version, because Nathan was the one person whose opinion of her she had never been able to be indifferent to. Because you were proud of me, she said. The version of me you knew. The one who teaches in Portland and has plans in a normal life. And I didn't want to take that from you. Nathan's jaw worked. His eyes were doing the thing they did when he was holding more than he wanted to show. I'm proud of you right now, he said, more than I have ever been proud of anything. The medic finished with her shoulder. Claire looked down at the dressing, then back up at her brother. I'm sorry, she said, for not telling you sooner. You saved my people, Nathan said. You saved this base. You went back to that tower alone with 1 round. He shook his head. Don't apologize to me. Hayes cleared his throat, not interrupting, just reminding them that the room had other people in it, which it did, and those people had stopped pretending not to listen approximately 20 minutes ago. For the record, Hayes said to the room as much as to Claire, official incident report will reflect that a civilian contractor with relevant expertise assisted in base defense during a coordinated enemy assault. No specific identification, no classification details. He looked at her. That's the story. Anyone in this room who has a problem with that story can come see me individually. No one had a problem with the story. Ortiz from the corner said Ghost 7, quietly, like she was testing the words. That's a real designation. I've heard it in briefings. Pre-war contractor roles, long-range precision. She looked at Claire. You're listed as inactive. I am inactive, Claire said. You took 2 command shots tonight, 800 meters and 450, with a compromised rifle and a drifted scope. I got lucky. Ortiz smiled, small and genuine. Nobody gets that lucky. The radio crackled. Rapid reaction force 7 minutes out. The sound of rotors distant, growing the specific thrumming frequency of military helicopters. That was one of the most reliably reassuring sounds Claire had ever learned. The room moved Hayes up and directing soldiers repositioning to mark the landing zone, the medical team organizing for the incoming support. Claire stayed where she was for a moment. Chen sat down beside her. He had been quiet through all of it, the conversation with Nathan. The exchange with Hayes, the revelation that had rippled through the room in a way that was still rippling. He sat beside her and was quiet for another moment, and then he said, "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "The shot at 450, second command element. 1 round left." He paused. "Were you confident?" Claire thought about it honestly. The platform, the wind, the scope. Nathan's unit coming around the corner in 40 seconds. "No," she said, but confident was not the available option. Necessary was the available option. Chen nodded slowly. "And the difference between necessary and impossible, practice," she said, "and not having a choice." He thought about that. "I want to be that good someday. You were good tonight. You stayed calm and you did your job and you trusted your instincts. That's the beginning of everything." He looked at her. Would you ever know Grim?" She said gently. "I won't be training anyone. I'm going back to Portland." A pause. Tuesday mornings, she said. Self-defense. Women who want to learn how to be safer. That's what I do. Chen looked at her for a moment with something in his face that was trying to reconcile two incompatible images of the same person and not quite managing it. She understood. She had been trying to reconcile them herself for 4 years. The helicopters arrived at 23:01. The Rapid Reaction Force came in fast and organized the way such forces did when the intelligence picture they'd received on approach had told them it was still an active situation, and they found instead a base-battered but standing perimeter holding enemy contacts withdrawn. The force commander, a major named Dillard, compact and efficient, went directly to Hayes and got the situation report in 3 minutes, and then spent the next 20 sweeping the perimeter and confirming the breach points, and doing the things that people do when they arrive ready for a war and find that someone else already finished it. He found Claire in the command room at 23:22. He looked at her in the specific way that people looked at her when they had received some information and were trying to match it to the person in front of them. Colonel Briggs sends his regards, Dillard said. Tell him I'll send a bill, Claire said. Dillard almost smiled. He said you'd say that. He looked at her shoulder. He also said to make sure you got proper medical attention and not to take no for an answer. I've had medical attention. More thorough medical attention. There's a surgeon on the second bird. He paused. He also said to tell you, and I'm quoting directly, that he knew you still had it. Claire looked at the ceiling for a moment. Tell him, she said carefully, that having it and using it are two different things and that I intend to go back to the second one. Dillard delivered the message by radio. She didn't hear Briggs's response. The night moved through its final phase, the accounting of damage, the treatment of wounded, the securing of a perimeter that had been breached twice and was now held by twice the bodies it had started the night with. Webb was moved to the medical team and declared stable. Martinez got proper treatment for his shrapnel wound and complained about it at sufficient volume to reassure everyone around him. Hayes wrote the first draft of his incident report in the command room, while Ortiz read over his shoulder and occasionally corrected his timeline. Nathan found Claire at 0100 sitting outside on a crate near the south entrance, with a cup of coffee that was only slightly better than the one she'd had on the first morning. He sat beside her. For a while they didn't say anything. The base worked around them, the recovery operation in its middle stages, and the sky above Ashford was dark and full of stars, in the way that dead cities sometimes were no light pollution, just the actual sky, more sky than most people ever saw. You're going to leave, Nathan said. In the morning when the first transport goes out. And go back to Portland. Yes, he was quiet. Then, and go 7. She drank her coffee. She thought about that. About the answers she had been telling herself for 4 years, and the answers she had discovered tonight were not exactly the same answer. Ghost 7 did what she had to do tonight, Claire said, and she's going back in the box. But she's not gone. Claire looked at her brother, at the man he had become in the years she had been trying to become someone else, at the soldier who had held a corridor tonight with 14 people because his sister had told him to hold, and he had trusted her the way he had always trusted her since before either of them had any reason to know she was worth trusting. No, she said, she's not gone. Nathan put his arm around her shoulders, careful of the dressing, careful in the way that people were careful with things they had come close to losing. She leaned into it slightly, which was more than she usually allowed herself. Will you come back, he asked, just to visit like a normal person? I came to visit as a normal person. And look how that went. She almost laughed. It was real enough to count. Yes, she said, I'll come back. They sat there in the dark, and the base worked around them, and the stars were very clear above the ruins of Ashford. And somewhere in those ruins, the remnants of an enemy force that had planned for 11 days and accounted for everything were moving away from the only thing they hadn't accounted for. At 0600, Colonel Briggs called. Claire took the call in the command room alone. Hayes having given her the space with the instinct of a man who understood when a conversation was not his to witness. Briggs's voice was the same as it had always been, precise and warm in equal measures, like a man who had learned to care about people and hadn't yet decided if that was a strength or a liability. You did well, he said. I did what was necessary. Those aren't different things. They are to me. She paused. You should have given me better information before I walked in there. I gave you what I had. The threat assessment was elevated risk, not confirmed operation. You found the confirmation. I found it in 8 minutes. Mom, I knew you would. A pause. That's why I called. Briggs, the region is going to need someone who can do what you did tonight. Not continuously, not as a commitment. Periodic assessment, consultation, someone who sees what other people miss. No, don't. Claire, I am going back to Portland. I am going to water my plants. I am going to teach self-defense on Tuesday mornings, and I am going to visit my brother like a civilian, which means without this conversation having happened. Silence on the line. Then, you can't put it back in the box, you know that? I'm not putting it in the box, she said. I know exactly what I am. I know exactly what I can do, and I am choosing to do something else with it. She paused. There's a difference between being something and performing it on command. I'm not a weapon, Briggs. I'm a person. A long silence. Understood, Briggs said finally, and then quieter. I'm glad you're alive. So am I, she said. Goodbye, Colonel. She ended the call. She stood in the command room for a moment alone in the early morning light coming through the windows, and she felt the weight of the night settling into her body. The way weight settled after the shoulder, the legs, the specific exhaustion that lived behind the eyes when you had been running on adrenaline and will for 8 hours, and both had finally finished. She felt it and she let herself feel it, and she didn't try to turn it into anything other than what it was. The transport left at 07:30. Nathan walked her to it. He carried her bag, which she didn't argue about. At the vehicle, he stopped, and they stood there in the way they'd stood at the gate when she arrived, which felt like a different era of the same life. Tuesday mornings, he said. Tuesday mornings. And you'll answer when I call. I always answer when you call. You take 3 days sometimes. I'll answer faster. He hugged her. She hugged back. No ambivalence this time, no maintenance of distance, no part of herself being rationed. She held on to her brother and let it be what it was. Love uncomplicated, the one thing in her life she had never managed to complicate despite considerable effort. I love you, she said, because she should have said it more and had learned something tonight about the cost of not saying things. I love you too, Nathan said. Go 7. She pulled back and looked at him. He was smiling, a little sad, a little proud, entirely her brother. She got in the transport. As the vehicle moved out through the main gate, she looked back once. Nathan was standing at the fence watching. Chen was beside him, which she hadn't expected, and Ortiz was there and 2 or 3 of Nathan's soldiers. All of them watching the transport carry her out through the broken streets of a city that had spent the night trying to break them and had failed. She faced forward. The ruins of Ashford moved past the window, and she let them go without cataloging them. No sight lines, no elevation points, no blind spots. Just a dead city in the early morning light getting smaller behind her. She thought about Portland. She thought about her apartment, which would need airing out after a week away. She thought about her Tuesday morning class, 7 women ranging from 28 to 64, learning how to be safer in a world that didn't always wish them well. She thought about what she would teach next week. Something practical. Something that worked. Something that mattered in a way that was scaled to real life rather than to this life. She thought about Nathan's face in the dark. The pride in it, and the fear in it, and the love in it, and how all 3 of those things, they had been there simultaneously, which was the most honest portrait of someone who truly knew her that she had ever been given. She was not a myth. She was not a call sign. She was not a weapon that could be pointed at a problem. She was a woman who knew how to do something that most people couldn't, and who had decided years ago and confirmed again tonight that she would choose when that something was used and why and for whom. Ghost 7 had saved a base full of soldiers in a dead city because her brother was inside it, and because the people inside it were worth saving, and because there had been no one else. That was enough of a reason. It was the only kind of reason she had ever needed. The transport carried her out of Ashford and back toward a life she had built carefully and would return to intact, changed in ways she would spend weeks understanding, but intact. And in Portland on the following Tuesday morning, 7 women walked into a room where a quiet instructor was waiting for them, and they did not know what she had done the week before, and she did not tell them. She just taught the class. And when it was over, she went home and watered her plants and called her brother. He answered on the first ring. Ghost 7 was not gone. She had never been gone. She was simply living the life she had chosen on her own terms in her own time, ready if she was needed, but not defined by the readiness. That was not a compromise. That was not a retreat. That was the hardest kind of strength there is, the kind that knows exactly what it can do and chooses every single day what it will do instead.